The clatter of cutlery and the low hum of conversation in the sleepy roadside diner was shattered by a sound that was far uglier, the cruel, mocking laughter of three teenagers. They were clustered in a booth, their faces twisted with a sense of impunity as they tormented the lone girl across from them. Her name was Sarah. She sat in a wheelchair, her body shaped by cerebral palsy. Her words came out in slow, deliberate efforts, her hands trembling slightly. This was what they found so hilarious. They mimicked her stutter, snatched the napkin she was slowly folding, and one of them, a lanky boy with a sneer, had just slapped the fries from her hand, sending them scattering across the linoleum floor. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She stared at the greasy, scattered fries, a hot shame washing over her. The other patrons, a few truckers and an elderly couple, looked on with uncomfortable glances, but did nothing. The confrontation felt too volatile, the teenagers too feral. An hour ticked by, the longest hour of Sarah's life. The bullies, emboldened by the lack of consequences, had ordered milkshakes and were now taking pictures of her, their whispers sharp and venomous. Then, the bell above the diner door jingled, not with a gentle tinkle, but with a forceful clang that made everyone look up. The air in the diner changed. It grew thick, charged with the presence of the new arrivals. They weren't just men, they were a wall of denim, leather, and muscle. The Road Guardians MC. Their vests, adorned with patches and insignias, spoke of miles traveled and a code lived by. They moved with a heavy, deliberate grace, their boot heels thudding on the floor, filling the silence they had created. Their leader, a mountain of a man with a salt and pepper beard and eyes that had seen too much, was called Duke. He scanned the room, his gaze a physical weight. It swept past the uncomfortable truckers, over the elderly couple, and landed on the booth in the corner. He saw the triumphant smirks of the teenagers. And then he saw Sarah. He saw the tear tracks on her cheeks, the defiant set of her jaw, and the scattered fries at her feet. His eyes narrowed to slits. Without a word, he started towards her booth. His men, a silent, formidable procession, followed. The teenagers' laughter died in their throats. The lanky boy's sneer melted into a look of pure, undiluted fear. Duke didn't even look at them. He walked right up to Sarah's table, his massive frame blocking out the light. He knelt down, the leather of his chaps creaking. The act of this giant, fearsome man getting on one knee was more powerful than any shout. "You all right, darlin'?" he asked, his voice a low rumble, like distant thunder. Sarah, trembling, managed a small, shaky nod. One of the other bikers, a man with a scar tracing his jawline, was already gathering her scattered fries onto a napkin. Another, a younger guy with kind eyes, gestured to the waitress. "Get her a fresh plate of whatever she's having. On us. And a chocolate milkshake, the biggest you got." Duke finally turned his head, his gaze now locking onto the three teenagers. They looked like they wanted to disappear into the vinyl of their booth. "These boys giving you trouble?" Duke asked Sarah, his voice deceptively calm. The lanky boy found a shred of foolish courage. "We weren't doing nothing, man. Just having fun." The word, fun, hung in the air, sour and ugly. Duke stood up, his full height making the ceiling seem lower. He didn't move towards them. He didn't have to. The sheer, focused intensity of him and his brothers was a cage. "Fun," Duke repeated, letting the word sit there. He looked at Sarah's wheelchair, then back at the boys. "You think it's fun to pick on someone who can't fight back? That make you feel strong?" The silence was absolute. The only sound was the sizzle from the grill in the kitchen. "Here's what's going to happen," Duke said, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried to every corner of the diner. "You're going to get up. You're going to walk over to this young lady. And you're going to apologize. Not a mumble, a real, proper apology. And then you're going to pay for her meal. And for ours. And then you're going to leave. And if I ever see your faces near her again, we're going to have a different kind of conversation. You understand me?" There was no argument. There was no hesitation. The three bullies, their bravado completely evaporated, shuffled out of their booth. One by one, they stood in front of Sarah, their heads bowed, and muttered genuine, terrified apologies. They scraped their money together, laying a crumpled pile of bills on the counter, before practically running out the door, the bell jingling frantically behind them. The tension broke. The bikers took over two large booths, their laughter and deep voices now a warm, protective blanket over the diner. Duke sat down with Sarah while they waited for their food. "My little brother had MS," he said softly, his rough hand wrapped around a coffee mug. He passed a few years back. Nobody ever laid a hand on him. Not twice, anyway. Sarah gave him a real smile then, the first all day. When the food arrived, the bikers ate with gusto, sharing stories and including Sarah in their conversation. For that hour, she wasn't the disabled girl in the wheelchair. She was an honorary road guardian. When it was time to leave, Duke helped her with her jacket. "You remember," he said, his voice firm but kind. "You're stronger than you think. And you've got a lot of uncles on the road now. You need anything, you tell any one of us." Sarah watched them mount their roaring motorcycles, a fleet of steel and solidarity. As they pulled out onto the highway, the lanky boy and his friends were still visible, standing by their cheap car, watching the display of power they had so foolishly provoked. They didn't wave. They didn't look back. They just rode off, leaving behind a quiet diner, a restored sense of justice, and a young woman who now knew that sometimes, angels wear leather, not wings.